Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
We'd like to thank Woodbine for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB. Woodbine open now through December, featuring great racing, including the King's Plate coming up in August, Turf Champions Day with the Woodbine Mile in September, and much, much more. Woodbine Racing, great racing north of the border. Good morning and welcome to Racing Across America on this Sunday morning. Seth Merrow in the studio, and as is typical on a Sunday morning, we'll recap some of that Saturday action a little bit later on, Belmont and Keeneland. Actually, going back to Friday, there was a upset in the stake Friday at Keeneland, and there was a 2-year-old worth watching at Keeneland as well. We'll hit on those a little bit later on. Before we get underway, though, I do want to alert you. We mentioned it just before I wrap things up in the afternoon yesterday. They had already made the decision late in the day, but they made the decision, Belmont at Aqueduct, canceled for today due to that storm that's coming up the coast, rain and heavy wind expected. So no New York racing down at Belmont at Aqueduct this afternoon. Keep that in mind as the afternoon progresses. We'll be back on this afternoon, of course, with OTB Live, and I'll have some Keeneland in the mix. May pull up some... We'll figure out what the second track will be, and we'll have a look at some other action as well. But going back to yesterday, again, we'll look a little bit later on at Belmont at Aqueduct and Keeneland, but we'll start things out. Maryland Million Day yesterday. Yesterday we had Callie Francois and John Piasek giving us some preview thoughts, and they handed out some good information yesterday in preview. And in review, who better to reach out to than our friend Frank Vespe, theracingbiz.com, great website that covers Mid-Atlantic racing. And that meant Frank was not only at Laurel yesterday, but he was over at Charlestown for West Virginia Breeders' Day as well. Frank, good morning.
Hey, Seth, good morning. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. And we were talking before we went on the air. Long day for you yesterday. Kicked things off Maryland Millions and then went over to the State Bred Stakes action, West Virginia Breeders' Day. Just give us a little quick overview of what it was like the evening racing. I'm assuming it was a big day out that way as well.
Yeah, they do it up. It's a big deal, and it's the big race, the Classic, the Sam Huff Classic, goes for $300,000. So that's a pretty big deal in West Virginia, and it's always it's a fun day. It's for the local horsemen. It literally was inspired by Maryland Million, which itself was inspired by the Breeders' Cup. So it has that kind of pedigree. It's a year younger than the Maryland Million, and it has that same kind of cachet for those horsemen. The chance to kind of shine on a day when people are paying attention. So it's a lot of fun. As you mentioned, I got home at 2 a.m. after that, and I'm a little bit older than I used to be. So that doubleheader gets a little tougher.
Yeah, I hear you. Saratoga season, I don't get down to Caroline Street as much as I used to during the season, and it reaches all of us. Before we move on, you mentioned the Classic. It's the Sam Huff Classic. Sam was the guy kind of behind the Breeders' Day down there, correct? And talk a little bit about, I was reading your recap on the Racing Biz, and it sounds like it played out as expected in fine fashion.
Yeah, Sam Huff, obviously the Hall of Fame linebacker for the Redskins, and before that the Giants, was from West Virginia, grew up in a coal mining town, and was really beloved in West Virginia. And he and his partner Carol Holden went to the first Maryland Million, and as Carol tells the story on the way home, he said, why couldn't we do this in West Virginia? And she said the answer was basically because we don't have any money and we don't have any horses. But Sam was kind of a force of nature, and when he decided something was happening, it generally happened, and he made it happen. He found the sponsors, he beat the drum, he got it going. And, so it's a really nice testament to his involvement in racing. I mean, he loved racing, and so it's cool to see his name still attached to it and remembered for his efforts to get it off the ground. And in the Classic, Teach and the Release was the big favorite. I thought, I had talked with Paul Espinosa, the track announcer out there, and I had thought there would be some pace pressure on him, and that might soften him up a little bit for a couple others. There was no pace pressure on him. And so when they let him go in 48 and a piece for a half mile, that race was all over. He ended up winning by 14 lengths and just miles and miles the best. So, but if you hunted around a little bit, there were some surprises on the card, a couple of price horses, some favorites got beat. So pretty good handicapping. It was, in these races, sometimes you get these impossible horses, like there's, I could handicap this race every day for the rest of my life and never find that horse. But this was a day where it was kind of like favorites won, but also logical non-favorites won. Yeah. So if you were handicapping it, you had a pretty good chance to do okay.
Very good. And again, that was West Virginia Breeders' Classic night last night, but during the day, Maryland Millions, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday. You talk about Sam Huff in West Virginia. Over in Maryland, it was Jim McKay, who folks young enough might not remember, the legendary announcer for ABC Sports, but also a big fan of the horse racing game. And he was kind of the impetus behind the Maryland Millions, which subsequently, you say, West Virginia then started. But Maryland Millions was kind of the impetus for a lot of those state-bred big stakes days around the country. We now have a number of them in New York. Louisiana has a bunch of them at the various venues. But Maryland Millions kind of kicked off the concept.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Jim McKay went to the first Breeders' Cup, and kind of in the same way that Sam Huff on the way home from the first Maryland Million said, "Why can't we do this?" Jim McKay came home from the first Breeders' Cup and said to Billy Boniface, "Why can't we do a day like that for Maryland horses?" And and it was kind of the same response as my understanding at the time. Was kind of, well, we can't because where's the money coming from? And, Jim McKay made it happen and he and a few others kind of got it rolling and it's cool. I was looking back. We did a series of 10 Maryland Million moments on the website, theracingbiz.com, on the run up to yesterday. And it's cool looking back, back then the purses were substantially similar to what they are today. And the difference is back then, that got you graded stakes horses. That got you safely kept, who then went and won the Breeders' Cup Sprint. That got you, Harrod, who won the first Classic, who was a Grade 2 winner. I mean, that got you some serious horses around the country. Now it's, much more a local flavor, but the vision of celebrating Maryland horses remains the same and remains as sort of vibrant today as it was then.
We've talked with you before on the day after, and you said it's a big day in Maryland. And watching the feed yesterday, it looked like the same thing in the winner's circle and whatnot. Seems like everybody kind of turns out, the breeders, the owners, and all the important folks for Maryland racing. Just give us a little flavor of the day yesterday at Laurel.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Look, Maryland is a second-tier circuit. It's not New York, it's not Kentucky. So a lot of times when we have stakes, you get ship-ins from New York or Kentucky that win. Nobody comes. The races, you don't get the owner, you don't get the trainer, you don't get anyone. On a day like yesterday, as you said, everyone's there. They're super excited to be there. There are always just a ton of cool stories of, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but the winner of the Classic, Henry Walters, the trainer, he had never won a Maryland Million race before. He's been doing this for decades. He hadn't even won a stake for over 20 years until Barbadian Runner came along. And, it's stuff like that. That's what makes the game go. It's stories like that you're like, these are the guys, these are the salt of the earth people keeping this industry alive. And so for the chance for them to celebrate and be celebrated is very important, I think, and very special. And so it's always cool that way. And you get a nice crowd. I was talking to some people. The way Laurel is set up, the grandstand isn't really all that comfortable, so people tend to be outside. But on Maryland Million Day, there's enough people that people are in the grandstand, so there's kind of a buzz, and it's fun to, it's fun to be at the track when it feels like it's something that matters to people. And a lot of times, you guys are a little bit spoiled because it's Saratoga, but you go to Aqueduct on a Wednesday and who cares? And it's the same in Maryland. You go to Laurel on a Thursday, who cares? But you go Maryland Million Day and you're like, yeah, this is cool. This is what it used to be. And so it's a lot of fun.
That was coming through the screen yesterday too. You could tell the enthusiasm in the winner's circle after the races won. Yeah, very good to see that, the track getting that kind of life on, particularly when they deserve it on a big day like that. All right, let's kick in and take a look at some of the racing action from a Maryland Million Day yesterday. We'll kind of work our way backwards. The day wound up with the Maryland Sprint. As I said, I had John Piasek on yesterday, and he likes Slam Notion. We'll watch the replay here. It will be Slam Notion getting it done. Number 5, number 9, Twisted Ride. Haley's first Notion, who came in looking pretty good for Gary Capuano, coming out of a series of nice races at Delaware. And before that, Laurel winds up running third as the 3-2 favorite. But it's a nice stretch run from Slam Notion to get it done here. The chart margin is going to be a length and a quarter. Give us a little of some of the impressions on the sprint.
I got to correct you. John didn't like Slam Notion. He loved Slam Notion. He was all over Slam Notion. No, this is this is a cool race because you had these 3 horses: Slam Notion, Twisted Ride, Haley's First Notion. They're all by Great Notion, which is kind of neat. But they were the obvious horses in the race, and it doesn't often work out this way. But the 3 of them turned for home as one. So you really got the chance you got the exact showdown that you wanted, and Slam Notion was able to get the money. I mean, he's just a nice horse. Heavy on Toledo was up. He became the all-time leading Maryland Million rider yesterday. I think it was either Prado or Dominguez had been tied, and Toledo won a couple to take the lead.
That's Heady Company.
Yeah. I mean, as a lot of really good riders have come through Maryland. Yeah. Were Bugs here, and in both the case of Domingo and Prado, they stayed here for a number of years and kind of honed their talents, and then went to New York and did really well. Toledo takes the lead over those guys, and I had talked with Robbie Bales, the trainer, earlier in the week, and he had a couple of live horses, and in fact he won 2 races. He and the owners of this horse, the Eric and Nancy Reiser, won 2 races on the card, so that was exciting for them. This is a homebred for the Risers, so it's a very kind of Maryland Million story. Local people, make good, and that's a nice horse. This is a nice group of horses. I think the Sprint is the race that most consistently produces good horses. I think Maryland breeders tend to breed better sprint horses than distance horses in general. So this race usually comes up tough. And these are 3 legitimate horses that were 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, the winner now 6 wins and 11 starts. And I always say when you can win over half of your starts, you have some talent. So you're right. I think that was a nice field. Nice field also in the Maryland Million because of the favorite. But it winds up, I was talking with John yesterday. He was saying it's going to be tough to get past post time, but there are a couple others in here, including Barbadian Runner, that might be a little bit interesting. And I said, yeah, you can take a shot against, but then they come down the stretch and at post time runs his Laurel record to 11 for 11. You can just be happy you were there and saw it. But it didn't work out that way. We'll watch the stretch run, and it's going to be number 2 Barbadian Runner with the upset as the second choice at 6-1. 1-9 post time runs second in here. The number 5 horse, number 6 Blue Kingdom, runs third. So this was kind of a massive upset at 6-1. But again, post time came in undefeated at Laurel. That's kind of incredible, 10 for 10, but gets upset yesterday. What was the buzz around the track after the Classic?
Well, a lot of people were really, people love Post Time. He's a cool horse. He's run at Laurel a lot, and as you said, was undefeated. But he's also, gone on the road, won graded stakes, was second in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, made $1.5 million. I mean, people really like Post Time. I don't think anybody was really upset at this outcome other than Post Time's connections, because the story of Barbadian Runner is so cool. And, I think if you ask a lot of Maryland horse people, like, what's the good version of sort of the prototypical Maryland horse, they'd probably say, breeding maybe a little unfashionable, outruns his pedigree, shows up every time, tries hard all the time, dances all the dances. The kind of horse that takes his lunch pail to work. He doesn't eat out. He brings the lunch pail. And that's Barbadian Runner. I mean, he's by Barbados, who started standing in Maryland, now stands in West Virginia for $1,000. The owner, Scott Grow, paid $5,000 to buy this horse as a yearling. The trainer, as I mentioned, literally had not won a stake in over 20 years before they got this horse. This horse now made $700,000, and it's just an incredible story. And Scott Grow was there with his family, including his granddaughter, and his granddaughter's name is AJ, and that's the AJ in the stable name, AJ Will Win Stables. So named for the granddaughter, and it's a fun story because. I've been sort of talking to Henry Walters throughout this process, and when this horse first won a nice race, I think it was going 6 furlongs, and he said, well, it's a sprint pedigree. I don't really know if he'll go 7, but we'll probably try him. And, then it was, I don't think he'll go a mile. I don't think he wants 2 turns. And when I talked to him this week before this race, I said, well, are you concerned about going 9 furlongs? And he said, you know what? He's outside the lines of his pedigree. He just runs. And one of the things that might get lost a little bit here, this race was a slow, early, fast, late race. They came home in less than 36 for the last 3/8 of a mile. It's not like Post Time was stopping. Barbadian Runner just outran them. And they kind of eyeballed each other at the furlong pole, and Barbadian Runner kind of was like, nope, you're not going by, pal. Sorry. And that was a legitimate effort from that horse. And Post Time is obviously not quite the Post Time that ran second in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, but still ran okay, and Barbadian was just better yesterday. So I think a lot of people were, not that they're anti-Post Time, but you can't like Maryland racing and not love a horse like Barbadian Rock.
Yeah, just racing in general. You see somebody pick up a horse for $5,000 and have a career like this. Forrest Boyce on board. Forrest has been on board for many of the starts of our Barbadian Runner. And I'm looking, at the racing forum here. Breeder was Shamrock Farm. That's the Tom Rooney family farm, correct?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep. And Barbados stood at Shamrock. Shamrock had kind of a bunch of kind of second-tier local stallions over the years, and Barbados being one. But yeah. So it's kind of an interesting. Jim Steele, who was the farm manager forever and ever, was around. I think he was probably in the winner's circle for that. He was around all day yesterday, and he's been involved with Maryland Million for years. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting to see Shamrock horses still winning races, even as Shamrock ceases to be Shamrock.
Are they now? Were they designated as the training facility and kind of the where horses will be housed? Now they're going to go to Pimlico. They were in the discussion, I know.
Yeah, no, they were. That was the one that they settled on. We'll see how this all plays out. There's a lot of stuff going on around this. I mean, Shamrock is the piece of land isn't really ideal for a training center because it's not very flat, and so there's kind of a lot of conversation about how to do this and how much money it's going to cost.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is supposed to be the training center. Yep.
Interesting. And for folks who don't know, Tom Rooney, the head of the NTRA, that's why I noticed that. All All right, let's move one race earlier, the Maryland Million Ladies. We're going to take a look at the stretch run here. It is going to be number 4, Worth a Dime. Relatively lightly raced, came in with 5 starts, a win and a second-place finish, hence went off at a nice 11-1, kind of as you mentioned earlier, in that mid-range, and a horse you could have looked at and you could have made a little bit of a case for. There were others in here maybe a little bit more interesting, obviously, including the favorite, Precious Avery, who winds up last at 8-5 in the field. But what were your thoughts on the ladies?
Yeah, this is Tim Keefe gets the money here. He's the trainer of this one for Nancy Lee Farms, the owner breeder. Jorge Ruiz Ruiz he's really good. He's especially really good on the turf. And so anything he gets on, you kind of got to give a second look to, because he's just a good rider. And I was surprised to see Precious Avery go off as the favorite. I mean, she looked to be the controlling speed and had won this race a couple years previously, but she just seems like an inch not as good as she was. And so I was surprised to see the way they bet her, and then she kind of ran an inch not as good as she was. So, but yeah, this was a nice effort for Worth a Dime. This was obviously a horse moving in the right direction, and so they've got to be pretty pleased with that jump up.
Yeah, it was it was a good looking effort. Only the 6th career start, now a couple of wins, and so as I say, you could have looked at the career debut and hoped to get back to that. The races since there was a second place in the follow up, and then the next 3 not quite as good. But again, you could have gone down a little bit and looked up the 11-1 price and said, I'm going to take a shot. Particularly if, like you weren't convinced necessarily on the favorite. So. As you said earlier, it was a day where there was some potential to play around a little bit. Not so much so in the Maryland Nursery. I said yesterday, as we were talking about these races, I love the 2-year-old races this time of year, because we're only a couple of 3 months away from turning the calendar and becoming 3-year-olds. And so it's always interesting to see if there's some potential in groups like this. And the betting public was on it. We all mentioned, Callie and John and I were kind of going over the field here, all somewhere in the mix, had mentioned Big Cuddle for Gary Capuano coming out of the debut win at Delaware. And it's 70 cents to the dollar. Number 4, Big Cuddle, does get it done as the favorite, but he had a 20-1 shot underneath in Moe's Glitter, the number 12. Lundy Loot, who I also thought was a little bit interesting, comes in 3rd at 5-1. But the big favorite gets it done here, and we can roll into the conversation, because you mentioned over the years, apprentices have done very well on the Maryland circuit and then moved on to have bigger and better careers. And we talked a little bit about the jockey yesterday, Hazelwood, an apprentice down there in Maryland who's making a lot of noise and had a good day yesterday, including this race, the win in the nursery with Big Cuddle.
Yeah, this Gary Capuano is the trainer, and he won 2 on the day. Hazelwood was up on both. He's a young kid that Jose Corrales, the trainer, who was a former jockey, brought up from Panama. And this kid can ride. You want to keep an eye on him. And talking to Gary Cap not after this race, after the other race, he won the ladies. He said, well, me, I love the bug. I love riding bug riders. And this kid has a big future. And he does. Horses run for him. He puts them in good position. He sticks with it. He doesn't quit on horses. Like this horse, kind of got pinched back at the break, was in last early. And, he just kind of patiently stuck with it, got him outside and let him make his run. I don't know how you get 3 to 5 in this race. So,
yeah, no, I agree.
I mean, I don't know what you thought, but I'm looking at this race. I can make a case for a bunch of these, and the betting public could only make a case for Big Cuddle. So, the Capuano barn that's another one, kind of if you don't pay a lot of attention to racing down here, when you see 2-year-olds from Gary Capuano, give them a very long look. Because everything he sends out, every 2-year-old, just everything he sends out in general, but all of his 2-year-olds are super live.
Yeah, I am looking at the Daily Racing Form stat, and it's a pretty eye-popping 35% with 2-year-olds overall. Those are pretty good numbers. And we mentioned it yesterday. Hazelwood firing at 23% at the meet, and those are good numbers as well. I'm going to be interested. It's been the last couple of weeks. I kind of picked up on watching him as an apprentice. And again, just over the years, the apprentices coming out of Maryland. I mean, this is going back decades. I mean, the McCarrans, it goes back decades.
Yeah.
The apprentices coming out of Maryland are very interesting. And so he's going to be fun to watch, Hazelwood.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, like I said, he's just a young kid. He's 17, 18 years old. It's all out there for him if he wants it and if he can, keep his head on straight, which is always a challenge for young kids. We were young kids ourselves once, and if somebody starts waving a lot of money in front of you and telling you how good you are, it can be hard to resist the siren song. But if he can keep it together, he's got a really bright future. I mean, he won, I think, 4 races yesterday. So, on Maryland's biggest day, when all the riders are around, you win 4 races, you're doing all right.
Yeah, it's again, a name to keep in mind for folks. Tuck it away and keep your eyes on that one down the Maryland circuit, and as he maybe bounces around in the future. And we can take a look at him winning another one. The stakes race just prior, the Maryland Million Distaff, race number 7 on the card yesterday, 7 furlongs for the fillies and mares. Hazelwood gets it done for Capuano, but also John Piasek gave a little tout to Onyx 10 yesterday, and Onyx 10 does get it done. The number 3 horse here with Hazelwood on board. Number 8, Green Eyed Monster second. Number 12, Foxy Jr., who was the 4-5 favorite, winds up third in here. But again, another win for the apprentice, who we should reiterate on stakes days doesn't get the weight allowance, so it's even a little more impressive. But your thoughts on the win in the distaff?
Yeah, this was another one, as you say. John was on, and John does a good job, by the way. He's a really good handicapper, and he loves this stuff. But this is another Capuano Hazelwood production, and this was a nice effort. Talking with Gary after the race, this is a horse that had been running pretty well, then had kind of an off-color race, got a bunch of time off, came back last month in a $100,000 Delaware certified race at Delaware Park, won that, came here, won this. And I said, was this kind of the target? And he basically said it was a 2-step target. The first target was Delaware race, and if that went okay, it was this race. And he said, plan, everything worked out perfect. That doesn't always happen. And as you know, in horse racing, that often doesn't happen. So for the plan to come together that perfectly is, it's good horsemanship and good luck, and you need both of them in this game if you're going to survive. And this was one where he was able to save ground much of the way, then tipped them out for run, and he went and got everybody. I thought it was a nice effort, too, from Green Eyed Monster on the front end, who, kind of Foxy Jr. kind of loomed a threat, and she turned her back, but then couldn't hold off Onyx 10. It had a little bit too much momentum, but I thought it was a nice effort for that horse as well. And the exacta, $74 for a buck. That's not bad.
Yeah, and as I said, John had it on the show as $15 winner. So a nice price on the win end there. Again, another one of those horses that you mentioned earlier. You could have coming out of a win at Delaware. So to get $15 for, a prominent trainer down there, the apprentice who was doing very well, that was a generous price, I thought. But part of that played into the field. 12 horses there. The race we just talked about before had, I think, 13 in it. It was a nice day. It was a fun day down there. And there was, as we mentioned earlier, some opportunities. And I mentioned it when I had John on yesterday, and we've mentioned him a couple times today. John Piasek, people can find his selections regularly over on theracingbiz.com.
Every day of live racing in Maryland, we've got John's picks on theracingbiz.com, and he does do a good job. And he's a guy, he sniffed out last year, a couple of years ago, that a couple of trainers who have, who train on the flat, but also train jumpers, were giving horses like a training run at a point-to-point race that doesn't appear on your past performances, but it kind of meant these horses were much fitter than you'd expect for a horse coming off a long layoff. And, he cashed some nice tickets doing that. So he's following this very, very closely.
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, that does signify somebody who is watching closely. But that used to be a thing too. They used to have the open house up at Saratoga, and there would be training races for the steeplechase runners up there. And in your past performances, it would show up on the workout line. And so a lot of people, I don't think, realized, oh, that was an actual race they were in. And so they were maybe a little more alive than people thought. But now no more open house, so that angle isn't there anymore. But you can still find some of those hidden angles out there that are worth, tucking away a little bit. All right, let's go to the Maryland Million Lassie. This one for the 2-year-old fillies going 3/4 of a mile. Again, I had Callie Francois on yesterday. She liked Superstitious, as did the betting public. Went off at 4-5 in here, the number 10 horse, and gets it done, but has to work for it, as the chart margin is going to be a neck over number 2, Doc's Miracle, and number 1, Ginger Snap, runs third at 19-1. Sheer Success to me was the interesting horse for Brittany Russell off a debut win. Sheer Success wound up running fourth at 7-2. So that one was a little bit disappointing. But again, a nice run here, a nice late run for Superstitious to just get up in the shadow of the wire as the favorite, with Toledo on board again.
Yeah, and again, we talked about the Robbie Bales and the Risers. This is their horse as well, Superstitious, and this is a horse. This filly had been a couple of tough beats at Colonial Downs, one on the dirt, one on the turf. Coming into this, had lost to a horse named Just Filtered both times. It Just Filtered, a nice filly that Gary Capilano initially had, and then sold after she broke her maiden. And talking to Bales ahead of this race, I said, well, probably happy that Just Filtered isn't in this race. And he said, well, it doesn't hurt my feelings any. So yeah, this was a nice effort. Required a late run, but that's Toledo's kind of specialty is that kind of late outside run, pick them all up at the end, and so the way this race kind of developed worked out really well for kind of his style. So that worked out well. A good effort there from Doc's Miracle. That's another Gary Capilano yet today's old horse, and that was a tough beat there after leading most of the way and taking heat all the way around. So that might be another one to keep an eye on next time. That's a pretty nice try there. The other horses that were involved in the early pace, like Rerun Table and Barbados Bulldog, were kind of nowhere at the end. So this horse stayed on. Doc's Miracle stayed on well. So keep an eye on, I'd say, both of the top two in this one.
Yeah, it was a neck first to second, then it was 7 lengths back to third. So they had separated themselves. I agree. Doc's Miracle with a nice run. Just, again, got caught in the last stride, really. Also on the day, the Maryland Million Turf. This one was interesting to me. The betting was interesting to me because I thought, as we talked about this race yesterday, I thought they're going to have to get by the Miguel Clement runner. I thought Jack's Legend was the interesting horse in there, coming in from a win at Colonial. Nothing. The Miguel Clement runner was even money on the morning line, and I thought that's probably right. Coming in from New York, horse with some talent. I think the betting public will land there. But sneaking in from the also eligible list, Coringa actually got the action. Callie liked that one as well yesterday, and goes off at 6-5, just a little bit, a smidge ahead of Nothing as the second choice at 8-5. But again, I was a little bit surprised, but the betting public got it right. It is going to be number 9, Coringa, getting it done over number 7, Nothing, by a length and a quarter. And Jack's Legend, who I like, ran third in here. So it's kind of the logical players. But as I say, I was a little bit surprised the betting public wound up on the Trombetta runner, but they were right.
Yeah, no, I was surprised too. I was talking with Mackenzie Pfeiffer, who with Callie Francois is the on-air analyst for the Maryland Jockey Club, and she made, I thought, a really astute point about nothing, which is he's just kind of a galloping horse. He doesn't really have a turn of foot. He just kind of keeps going and going and going and going and going a mile and an eighth. That maybe wasn't going to play to his advantage. And she was exactly right about that. And I think, Karenga got loose and was never really threatened. I was talking with Mike Trombetta, the trainer, afterwards. This is kind of a neat story. One of his really big owners for decades was Larry Johnson. Larry passed away in February, which is really, Larry, was in this industry for 40 years and, breeding horses and really building both his racing and breeding operations to their apex right now. And it's sad that he's not around to see it. He bred Mindframe, he bred and owned Future Is Now. He's got all these really good horses. They're all come from basically the same family. It all starts with a $2,500 Charlestown mare named Rance Chick, 40 years ago. And so this horse, Karenga, is one that Johnson bred. And so it's kind of neat to see horses that he was connected to continuing to run as well as they have been all year. I mean, it's like everything with the Johnson name attached to it has just been running lights out all year. So it's neat to see for them, for their family, and for Trombetta to still be training these horses and getting wins out of them is pretty cool for them.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that immediately under the breeder line, Larry Johnson. But that is interesting because up at Saratoga, Future Is Now with a couple of wins. And after the first win in the winner's circle, there was some Johnson family members and Mike Trombetta got emotional after the win in that race. And then he subsequently won. Future Is Now won again a little bit later on. And I had Mike on the next day on the show on the backstretch, and we talked a little bit about it. And you could see how important, Larry was to Mike. And so that is a very nice time. Again, continuing the theme of Maryland Millions Day, providing a lot of good storylines as well as fun racing. And to me, that's always a fun part of the racing game, when you can have the good stories that kind of pump up a good day of racing as well. Let's take a look at race number 2 on the card, which kicked off the Maryland Million Stakes action. It was the Turf Sprint. And I pulled up a replay yesterday, had to have them. And I was in the right category there. When I Get to Heaven wound up being the favorite in there. No shock, really, off of a series of pretty good races, a couple of wins most recently for owner Ken Ramsey. But again, I thought Had to Have Him coming in off a series of good races himself, including a win in the Laurel Dash in the previous start, was a good-looking runner. And number 1, Had to Have Him, gets it done by 3/4 of a length over When I Get to Heaven, who again was the favorite. Had to Have Him was the 7-5 second choice. A little bit of a price in the third position. Great idea at 17-1, but Had to Have Him gets it done again under Avi and Toledo.
Yeah, no, it was a good day for Toledo, good day for Hazelwood. Not quite as good for just about everybody else, but those guys had a big one. This is a nice horse. This is a horse that's coming along pretty nicely for Salzman Jr. This race, obviously, the complexion of this race changed quite a bit with the morning scratch of Whitty, who was going to be the favorite. But you can't take anything away from Had to Have Him. He went out and got the money. It was an interesting race. I mean, I thought they did the right thing with Tidewater. They sent him. I think maybe if they don't send him, he could be third instead of fourth. But the only chance he probably had to win was to go and see what happened next. And so they did that, and that. Obviously it didn't quite work, but I thought it was the right play. But Had to Have Him got kind of that sit and wait and then kick wide and clear off kind of trip, which is the Toledo trip, and the trip obviously he liked. And Salzman Jr.'s father, folks may remember, trained Extra Heat.
Oh, right.
So that was the Hall of Famer Extra Heat. And I believe he's retired, but has been training up until, earlier this year or last year. So yeah, this is a horse they've really gotten to come around nicely in last couple of starts. And obviously you can have a lot of fun with a turf sprinter. There's a lot of races for them around here during turf season. So we're coming to the end of that, but they made pretty good use the last couple months.
I will say, and I've said this over the past year or so when these kind of races come up, as a handicapper for me, when these turf sprints started to become popular, for me, they were a complete puzzle. But now we're a few years into it, and I like them now. And from a handicapping standpoint, they are not the puzzle they used to be. But as I say, when it started, boy, it was, and part of that is you have even a little bit of trouble early in the race and you're done. And so you could have a great horse, but they just get, jammed up a little bit and things don't go your way. But from a handicapping standpoint, I am much more comfortable with the turf sprints now.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, probably, the thing that's tricky is nobody's breeding to get a turf sprinter. Yeah. Because it is such even today, even though they're popular, it's still such kind of a specialty category. Nobody really wants one. So you're getting kind of horses that couldn't do the thing that people would have preferred them to do. So that gets a little tricky, but yeah, I think you're right. You see so many of them now, and horses kind of establish their form. And even though, as you say, and you're exactly right, you have trouble at the gate, you're toast. But you can kind of account for that in your handicapping. It's, as long as if you're playing enough, you'll kind of law of large numbers will take over eventually, and the better horses will be the better horses. So
yeah, that's what it is. I think there's more of a database, so to speak, now of, and as you say, and I totally agree. I say it all the time, particularly races like this, turf sprint stakes. I think is kind of a specialty, and some horses are just very good at it, and you can kind of lean on those a little bit more. Frank, as always, appreciate the conversation. Take it easy today after the long day, the doubleheader yesterday. The doubleheader for me was the old days of Saratoga Flat Track and then pop over to Saratoga Harness. That, however, was across the street. You had to drive to another state, so I give you credit there. But Frank, always appreciate the conversation. As always, tell people to swing by theracingbiz.com and check out all the news and info and handicapping info as well for the Mid-Atlantic region. But Frank, we will talk again.
All right, Seth. Thanks so much for having me on. Great to talk with you.
Very good. Appreciate it. Frank Vespe, again, theracingbiz.com. Check it out. As Frank said, John Piasek's picks on there regularly, as well as some other folks handicapping and much more, recaps, previews, and racing news from the Mid-Atlantic region. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, as promised earlier, some races from Keeneland and Belmont at Aqueduct. Stay tuned.
코리아컵 출발합니다.
이 순간을 위해 여기까지 달려왔다. 이제 내일을 향해 뛴다.
Want to get your career in horse racing off to a fast start? Well, the University of Arizona's Racetrack Industry Program is your winning ticket. The Racetrack Industry Program has served as a springboard to some of the industry's most successful individuals, with a proven track record of job placement right out of college. If you want to earn a degree in the exciting horse racing industry, the Racetrack Industry Program can put you in the winner's circle.
Welcome back to Racing Across America on a Sunday morning, and that means, again, stakes recaps. We just went over the nice Maryland Millions Day, really the highlight of the season down at Laurel, although they have, the wintertime have some nice stakes days with some notable stakes as well. But this one, again, kind of celebrates racing down in the Maryland region. And now we will move on to some Keeneland and some Belmont at Aqueduct. And as I said at the top of the show, wanted to go back and show a couple from Friday at Keeneland. And we'll kick things off with the Sycamore, the stakes race at Keeneland, where Desvio gets it done for trainer Madison Myers at a juicy 34-1, $70.90 was the price here. Again, beating some obviously more logical horses. The favorite, Ohana Honor, went off at 9-5 in there and winds up running fourth. You can see there's a lot of them there at the finish, but with a nice late run, Desvio gets it done. Again, a $70 mutual. I mentioned it yesterday. I wanted to mention it again today as we saw the replay. On board was John Velasquez, who just phenomenal. The first, 6 days of the Keeneland meet. Yesterday, he was in New York, and we'll see, he won a stake in New York yesterday. So he couldn't add to those numbers. But the first 6 days of the Keeneland meet, going into yesterday, I didn't look up yesterday's stats to add to this because, again, Velasquez wasn't in Keeneland, so it's no surprise. IRAD probably leapfrogged him a little bit. But going into yesterday, John Velasquez was tied for the lead of wins at Keeneland with IRAD. They both had 9 going into yesterday. But of those 9 wins for Velasquez, 5 of them were stakes races. 4 of those were graded stakes. And clearly, he had 31 starts and 9 wins, including with the $70 horse. He's got a pretty good ROI because another one of those wins was a $20 stakes winner in the TCA. But John Velasquez, again, at the Keeneland meet, kicked things off on opening day, winning the Grade 1 Alcibiades on Tommy Joe. He went on the next day to win the Grade 1 Breeders' Futurity on Ted Naufy. He won the Grade 2 TCA on Praying. He won the ungraded Indian Summer on Schwarzenegger. And then yesterday, Desvio at $70 in the grade 2 days ago in the Grade 2 Sycamore. So he's great guy and just phenomenal rider, veteran rider, having a nice start to the Keeneland meet with, again, you're tied for the number of wins, and most of those wins are stakes races. Incredible. The trainer of Desvio, Madison Myers, it was her first graded stakes win, so congratulations to her because it was a good-looking performance, certainly from Desvio. And, I mean, that one had come in with 3 wins and 15 starts, so now 4 for 16, had run second in the previous start before Friday, had run second in a stake at Colonial, but breaks through on Friday. Madison Myers, I looked it up because I was curious where she normally runs, and it seems like she's Mid-Atlantic region, kind of in the Laurel area, with most of her entries in the next few days. So I assume that's kind of the base of operations. But congratulations to her. And again, congratulations also to John Velasquez on the win and the just phenomenal, early portion of the Keeneland meet. I had another one that I wanted to show from Friday because this was a good looking 2-year-old performance. We're going to look, the race just before the Sycamore was a maiden special weight event 2-year-olds going a mile and a 16th. And Further Ado wound up being the favorite in here at just over 2-1. The number 8 horse. It's a Brad Cox trainee. Irad Ortiz was on board. Coming out of a couple of races up at Saratoga, a couple of sprints. I always like that angle. A couple of sprints, and then you stretch out in the third start, either beginning the career or off a layoff later in the career. But we'll see here. Number 8, Further Ado, does get it done and gets it done very impressively. You can see there at top of the stretch, what are we, maybe 7 or 8 lengths ahead? The final margin, 20 lengths. Again, went off as the favorite, but kind of a lukewarmish 2-1, paid $6.48. But it's Brad Cox, it's Spendthrift. Spendthrift is on a little bit of a roll over the past few weeks, certainly. They're winding up with some nice runners that will be worth watching going forward, including this one, Further Ado. 20-length winner, a 98 buyer this time of year. That is certainly an impressive number for a 2-year-old. But as I say, sprinted a couple times up at Saratoga. They were okay. Seemed to clearly appreciate the experience, and then the stretch out Friday as well. Now, we have the Breeders' Cup coming up, but it's coming up pretty quickly, and it seems like they're shying away from turning around that quickly with Further Ado. Brad Cox said most likely the next start will be the Kentucky Jockey Club. That's towards the end of November at Churchill. Again, like yesterday, a mile and a 16. Seems like a logical spot. And again, they're going to get the spacing they prefer theirs. But we'll keep our eyes certainly on Further Ado. That was, again, a very impressive performance down at Keeneland on Friday by a 2-year-old. All right, let's move on now to yesterday in the QE2 at Keeneland. I have to admit, I liked Lush Lips. I've liked Lush Lips throughout the career. I did not use Lush Lips yesterday, however, to my detriment. In the QE2, Lush Lips was kind of attending the early pace, sitting second behind Opulent Restraint. I liked Laurel. Laurelin's going to make a run here, but it's just going to be a little bit too late as Lush Lips gets it done at a $19 mutual. I know Mike Callahan here at OTB came in earlier in the day, and he said he liked Lush Lips. And looking at social media, there was a number of people who were on board. So kind of surprised at the $19 price, but if you had it, I'm sure you're happy. And again, you can see Laurelin, who had come into this race undefeated, running second here, but it's just too late. They're kind of running even paced once Lush Lips got that lead. Lush Lips for Brendan Walsh, having a good early portion to the Keeneland meet as well. Tyler Gaffleone on board, and again, getting it done over Laurelin. The favorite was Fionn. Not shocked there necessarily, but the Brad Cox runner, having come out of a win in a stake at Kentucky Downs, and before that, a stake at Saratoga, and overall a really good record, 6 wins and 8 starts. But Fionn winds up 4th in the field there with maybe a little bit of trouble early on. But again, Lush Lips now 4 for 10 in the career with 4 second-place finishes, so a solid career. Laura Lynn, first loss of the career, the Graham Motion trainee. We'll see what is ahead for that one. But as I said, Brendan Walsh just going very well early, like John Velasquez. Brendan Walsh, that was his Lush Lips, his 6th win of the meet in the first 7 days, and his 3rd graded stake of the meet. So nice meet again down at Laurel for Brendan Walsh. All right, let's turn the page over to Belmont and Aqueduct New York Stakes action yesterday. Early in the day, it was the Artie Schiller, 3-year-olds and up, going a mile on the turf. I had Big Everest on top, a horse with some speed who I hoped could get out there, float along, as often happens in New York, and finish the deal. Well, went out and floated along, I guess. I don't think the fractions were crazy and was out in front, but could not sustain. And Big Everest winds up last in the field of 5 as the second choice at 5-2. Betting Public had it right. Major Dude, the number 2 horse for Todd Pletcher, went off at 73 cents to the dollar. And you can see the number 2 horse get it done here over Atago and Horsepower. Chart margin winds up to be a length, as you can see there. And again, a short-priced favorite, $3.46. But Todd Pletcher, spendthrift again, having a very good last few weeks or so. But also the continuing good fall for John Velasquez. Not down in Keeneland, not in Kentucky, but he comes to New York. Back to New York, back home, stakes win. So a nice win there for Major Dude and the connections. And a little bit later on in the afternoon, it was the Glen Cove for 3-year-old fillies. I like Love Severe in here. I like that one. Betting Public liked it. Didn't crush it. Went off at just a little over 2-1. But Love Severe for Miguel Clement, who was coming in off a second-place finish and an allowance at Kentucky Downs, had run third in the Galway up at Saratoga, and had won a stake up at Woodbine back in June. Those are the last 3 starts. Gets back to her winning ways here with a nice late run. The number 2 horse, Love Severe. Again, chart margin is a length. Flat out time second. Abino runs third. Abiento runs third. But it was the favorite getting it done. As I say, lukewarmish favorite at $6.76 under Manny Franco for Miguel Clement. Relatively lightly raced. But as I said earlier, when you can win half of your starts, I think you're kind of a special horse. And that was the halfway point. Win 4 and start 8 for Love Severe. And again, only a 3-year-old. So I expect we would have a good look going forward for that one. As we will, going back to the QE2 for which was also for the 3-year-old fillies on the turf, and the win by Lush Lips. Brendan Walsh after the race said, I think possibly a better 4-year-old. So we'll look for her to continue on as well off of that win in the QE2 to wind up the season. Well, I don't know if it'll wind up the season, but to kind of be late in the 3-year-old season bodes well for a 4-year-old season, you would think, for both of those horses. All right, I'm going to wrap it up as we come to the end of this edition of Racing Across America on this Sunday morning. Be back in a little for the afternoon, but before we wrap up, let me remind you of a few things. First, let me remind you today at the Clubhouse Racebook, if you'd like to swing by football action, you can go over to our food vendor, Black Bear, watch the games, and you can enjoy horse racing action and have some fun. Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. Tomorrow, we're on the road. We will be hopping in the car early in the morning and arriving at Finger Lakes before the opener, and then we'll have live cut-ins all afternoon. So tune in for that. I've said earlier this week, if you want to come out and join us, stop by and say hello. It's a quick ride up the thruway. Well, quick, but it's an easy ride up the thruway. Then you get off the exit. Finger Lakes is about 10 minutes away. So if you do want to go out on the holiday, Columbus Day tomorrow, and join us, come over and say hello. We're typically in a spot just behind the seats outside in the grandstand. We have a table set up. If you walk, on the row behind the seats, you will eventually see us. So come say hello. But if you can't come, again, we'll have live cut-ins all afternoon. But we also have a bankroll. And the bankroll entries will probably close shortly within the next half hour or so. So if you haven't put your name in the hat yet, make sure to do so. Go to capitalotb.com, click on the promotions link, look for that graphic, click on that, fill out the entry form. We will randomly select a team today. A team will get alerted. I'll play on behalf of the team tomorrow and hopefully split up a big amount of money at the end of the day. So again, the bankroll, a lot of fun tomorrow. Put your name in the hat. Just a few minutes left for that. A few other notes. Belmont and Aqueduct canceled late in the day yesterday. They canceled for today. They ran all day yesterday, and the weather yesterday was fine. But that storm is coming up the coast and will hit today, maybe already has, with rain and wind. So Belmont and Aqueduct canceled for today. We will have plenty more action here on the network. I'll look at Keeneland. I'll pull in another track as well. Probably, I was thinking, and I'm just looking, their openers coming up. I may pull in a little harness action today. We'll take a look at maybe a little Saratoga harness as well as Keeneland on this Sunday afternoon. So again, Belmont and Aqueduct canceled, however. Gulfstream Park, Rainbow Six as a mandatory today, 13,800. It was hit last Sunday, and then Friday they had the cancellation. So yesterday a little money got put into the pool, but again it's 13,000. If you go to their website, they're estimating $500,000, which wouldn't surprise me, because even if the pool, things like this have happened before, where somebody hits somebody singles and pulls down the pool in the Rainbow just before a mandatory. So the mandatory pool isn't that big, but people like to play in when there's a mandatory. So it wouldn't surprise me if they hit a decent amount of money today. But if you do like the Rainbow Six and the mandatory situation, Gulfstream today, that's the game plan with a mandatory in the Rainbow. And just congratulations to Steve Asmussen, who yesterday got career win 11,000. And when I read that, I thought, wasn't it just like a couple years ago he was at like 9,000 something to become the all-time leading trainer? And I went back and looked. How time flies. It was actually August of 21. It happened up at Saratoga. That's why it stuck in my mind. But it was essentially 4 years ago. Steve Asmussen did become the winningest trainer, winning career victory number 9,446. So, in 4 years, he's had another 1,500 plus wins to win career victory number 11,000 yesterday. And it was his son, Eric, on board a horse at Remington. So the family came together for that milestone victory, but just an incredible number there. 11,000 wins for trainer Steve Asmussen. All right, we'll take, I was going to say take a break. Technically we are, but I'm going to wrap up Racing Across America for this Sunday morning. We will be back, though, sooner rather than later, probably an hour and a half or so to kick things off on a Sunday afternoon. As I say, we'll take a look at a little Keeneland, probably pull a little Saratoga harness in the mix as well to take us through the afternoon. We will have plenty of other action, some Woodbine, some Gulfstream, and more. So all of that coming up a little bit later on OTB Live as we wrap up Racing Across America. Thanks for tuning in. See you a little bit later on.
Want to get your career in horse racing off to a fast start? Well, the University of Arizona's Racetrack Industry Program is your winning ticket. The Racetrack Industry Program has served as a springboard to some of the industry's most successful individuals, with a proven track record of job placement right out of college. If you want to earn a degree in the exciting horse racing industry, the Racetrack Industry Program can put you in the winner's circle.
The 2025 Global Symposium on Racing. It's the premier networking event of the year. Connect with the who's who of racing. Collaborate face-to-face with key decision makers. Be a part of the international conversation. Discover the latest technology and innovation. Join us December 8th through 10th. Register at racingsymposium.com.
We'd like to thank Woodbine for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB. Woodbine open now through December, featuring great racing, including the King's Plate coming up in August, Turf Champions Day with the Woodbine Mile in September, and much, much more. Woodbine Racing, great racing north of the border.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.